Is it possible for you to steel man, to play devil's advocate against yourself, and say that Vladimir Zelensky is fighting for the sovereignty of his nation, and in a way against Russia, but also against the United States? It just happens that for now, the United States is a useful ally, but ultimately, the man, the leader, is fighting for the sovereignty of his nation.
I would think he thinks so. Yes, and he could say that, but he's not acknowledging that the sovereignty of his nation was stolen. But in 2014, with the coup d'état that brought this right sector into power, and they have controlled the country since then. It's thuggery what they've done. The Medvedev case is a case in point. They just take what they need. They go to a house and they have how many people have been killed? Serious people, journalists killed by these battalions. That's what people don't realize. In other words, you can't speak out. You can't. A person like me would have been on the death list on day 5. There's no opposition to Zelensky, so he doesn't have a real sovereignty. It was a stolen sovereignty.
Do you think President Zelensky would accept an interview with you today?
Actually, since I made Ukraine on Fire documentary, which perhaps you've seen, which records the incidents of 2014 and the Maidan demonstrations and shows you the dishonesty behind it. No, I think that they've been very negative, and they would kill me if I was in Ukraine. I mean, they don't have any. These people are very tough. These are as rough as they come, in my opinion. And I've seen rough in my life. I mean, these guys are not playing with fair at all. These are death squads. No, I don't think. And Zelensky would have nothing to do with it. But of course, it would be dangerous for me. And they've been very hostile in their policies to any Ukrainians abroad are also threatened. In other words, you could be in Paris, but if you speak out too much, I think Ukrainians know that they're going to be targeted, and I think that's part of the reason they don't talk. A lot of them, you have to take the anti-Russian line, but I think a lot of them are divided.
So you think you would be killed and Zelensky wouldn't even know about it? So there is.
Well, if I was killed, certainly abroad, no, they wouldn't kill me abroad. I think they'd figure out a way.
No. If you travel to Ukraine, I mean,
I wouldn't get in. I wouldn't get in, except through Donbass. I'd come through. There are some Americans in Donbass who are reporting on the war there, and I read their reports. Actually, they're pretty interesting because they show you the cruelty of what's going on, but never mentioned in the West. Never. That's what's so strange about this. This is the modern world that we're living in, and yet this information is not coming out to the mass of the people. And on the contrary, the United States has closed down all the RT, all the information centers that are possible alternative news getting to the American people. They've seriously made an effort, and the BBC, English, and France. I was shocked when France closed RT down because RT is actually pretty good. You could call there are distortions, but you know as well as I do because you speak that RT has done a very brave job of putting correspondents into the field in very dangerous positions, and they've gotten great footage of some of the violence that's going on.
Well, given the wall of propaganda in the West, I also see the wall of propaganda in Russia, yes, the wall of propaganda in China, the wall of propaganda in India. What do we do with these walls of propaganda?
Yes, let's talk about Russia because you would know more about it. But my last experience there, newspapers, it was more interesting. Put it this way: when I went to Venezuela, the United States was saying back then that Chavez controlled the press. I get to Venezuela, and there's nothing but criticism of Chavez in the press. It was owned by the oligarchs of Venezuela, and who hated him. So it was across the board. That's why Chavez opened the state television, spent more money on it, and advertised his point of view through state television. But in Russia, there is what I saw was criticism. I met with the publisher who got the Nobel Prize of that famous newspaper. And his point of view at that time, when I spoke to him a few years ago, was there is criticism of him, but you can't call for the overthrow of the government, nor in Venezuela, nor in the United States for that matter. If you call for the overthrow of the government of the United States, you're going to be in deep trouble.
Well, all right. So to push back on that, it's interesting. It's so interesting because We mentioned Elon Musk, and there's a way that people sound when they speak freely. When I have family in Ukraine, I have family in Russia.
Yeah.
When I speak to people in Russia, let's put my family aside. When I speak to people in Russia, I think there's fear. I think they don't. Sometimes when you call for the overthrow of government, that's important, not because you necessarily believe for the overthrow of the government, but you just need to test the power centers and make sure they're responsive to the people. And I feel like there's a mix of fear and apathy that has a different texture than it does in the United States. That worries me because I would like to see the flourishing of a people in all places.
Well, as I said, my impression was that there's far more freedom in the press than was pictured by the West, and that means different points of view because the Russians are always arguing with themselves. I've never seen a country that's so contentious. There's more intellectuals in Moscow and the cities than you can believe, and the Russian people there. They've been fighting government for years, back from the 1870s, Tsarist times. They always plotting against the government. And the intelligentsia is known through history as being contentious and anti-government in many ways. And we see the same thing, educated people turning against Russia. I don't appreciate those people because I think they're very spoiled and they don't understand some of the stuff that's going on in the West. But we have a lot of Russians in Europe and America that attack Russia and sometimes don't understand that they are under pressure from the United States, and they don't understand the size of the pressure. And that's why Putin connects with the people, because he represents the common man who's saying to you, your interests are threatened. Russia is threatened. We are representing only the interests of Russia. We're not an empire. We're not going to expand. He has no empire intentions, although the West paints it as empire. I see no evidence of it. Why didn't he do something in all these years? Nothing. He did nothing except defend the country in Georgia and in Chechnya.
So the imperialist imperative is coming more from the West.
It's the imperialist agenda. Going back to, I'm sorry, where we left our discussion off. I mean, I was going to go on with America not only being censored, has closed down now, and you say it's not fear. Well, it is fear. I am scared because if you get your Facebook page suspended or your YouTube, your Twitter account thrown off, a lot of good people are getting their thrown off. You can't speak out. It affects your business. It goes back to the 1950s when my father's world, when you could not express any sympathy for a Soviet Union without endangering your job, without basically being not trusted. You had to be part of the program to go along. Same thing when United Kingdom. I mean, for all their talk, this Boris Johnson is an idiot. But all their talk about, do you remember their policies with the IRA in Ireland when Ireland was threatening them? They cut off the IRA completely. Gerry Adams, who was a wonderful guy, I met him, was not allowed to even be heard in Britain during certain years. In France, all constantly through the Algerian War, the Algerians were not allowed to be heard. The Algerian War for Independence divided France greatly. You could not even show Paths of Glory, a World War I film, in France for, 20 years after it came out. Censorship is a way of life when democracies also feel threatened. They are much more fragile than they pretend to be. A healthy democracy would take all the criticism in the world and shrug it off and say, okay, that's what's good about our country. Well, I'd like to see that in America. There are times that it's been like that, but it's so scary now. So it is scary. That's what I was trying to say. It's not unscary to me. In China, I would say to you, yes, it's much scarier to me because there is the internet wall that they cut off. And I got into problems in China too, because I said something in years ago about you have to discover your own history. You have to be honest about Mao. You have to go back and let's make a movie about Mao. That upset them, and show his negatives. So China has been much more sensitive than Russia about criticism, much more. And it is a source of problems. But on the other hand, China has a lot of grievances, a lot going back to the 19th century and the British imperialism of that era and the American imperialism.